Ladies and gentlemen, we all have those days when we just feel like laying down, watching TV, and ignoring everything else. It's normal to want a break, but there's a difference between resting and being lazy. Laziness is not just about taking time off. It's a state of mind, a choice to not put in the effort and to avoid challenges. So let's talk about what lazy people tend to do and how we can avoid falling into that trap. They avoid responsibilities. There's a certain mindset that comes with being lazy. One of the biggest traits of lazy people is how they avoid their responsibilities. Whether it's a work task, a family duty, or something as simple as keeping their living space clean, they tend to push things aside. It's not always that they don't know how to do it. It's that they don't want to do it. They're experts in making things seem less urgent than they really are. Avoiding responsibilities starts with small things. It might be skipping a chore you were supposed to do or not responding to an email that needs a reply. But over time, these small actions add up. Before you know it, responsibilities become mountains instead of hills. And when it's time to deal with them, they're so big and overwhelming that the lazy person can't even find the motivation to start. One reason lazy people avoid responsibilities is because they see them as inconvenient. Responsibilities often require effort and focus. They challenge comfort, and lazy people love their comfort. They think that avoiding responsibility now means avoiding discomfort. But the truth is, it only leads to more stress and even bigger problems later. Avoiding responsibilities can also be a form of fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of having to deal with consequences. So instead of confronting these fears head-on, they push responsibilities away and live in a state of constant avoidance. They pretend things aren't urgent until they reach a point where they can't ignore them anymore. But here's the catch. Responsibilities are inevitable. They don't just disappear if we ignore them. The more we avoid them, the worse they become. And that creates a cycle. Avoiding one responsibility creates more, and soon enough, the lazy person is buried in a pile of things they haven't done, and they feel stuck. Now let's consider what happens when we take responsibility serious. When we decide to face what's on our plate, even the small tasks, we feel a sense of accomplishment. The key here is consistency. By simply doing what needs to be done, even when we don't feel like it, we break the cycle of avoidance and build a stronger, more reliable character. When lazy people avoid their responsibilities, they also miss out on growth. Every responsibility is an opportunity to learn, improve, and show our worth. If we keep avoiding them, we rob ourselves of that chance. Instead of stepping up, lazy people take the easy way out, which in the end leads to stagnation. One thing we can do to avoid falling into the trap of laziness is setting small, achievable goals. Breaking big tasks into smaller chunks makes them seem less overwhelming. Instead of saying, I have to clean the entire house, say, I will clean one room today. This makes the responsibility feel manageable, and the act of completing it will build momentum for the next task. Accountability is also important. When we tell someone about our responsibilities, we create a sense of obligation. That simple act of sharing what we're supposed to do can push us to act because we don't want to let that person down. The fear of disappointing others can be a powerful motivator. The bottom line is that avoiding responsibilities only leads to more problems. It creates a snowball effect of procrastination and stress. By facing our responsibilities, no matter how small, we move forward and grow. When we take responsibility, we take control of our life. We decide to be active participants rather than passive observers in our own story. So the next time you feel tempted to avoid something important, remember that taking action, no matter how small, will always move you closer to the person you want to become. They procrastinate Procrastination is one of the most common traits of lazy people. It's like a silent enemy that creeps in and convinces you to put off today's work for tomorrow, or next week, or maybe never. It's the art of delaying things that you know you should do, even though deep down you understand the consequences of not acting on time. And while it may feel good in the moment, procrastination ultimately leads to stress, regret, and lost opportunities. The thing about procrastination is that it's not always a clear-cut decision. Lazy people don't necessarily make an active choice to procrastinate, but rather they let distractions take over their lives. It can start with a little "I'll just check my phone," or "let me watch one more video." What begins as a harmless distraction slowly takes up more of your time, until you realize hours have passed, and you haven't accomplished anything. This habit of procrastinating feeds into a cycle of anxiety. The more you put things off, the bigger the pile of tasks grows. At first, the tasks might seem manageable, but as time goes on, they start to feel overwhelming. The sense of dread builds up, and procrastinators often find themselves paralyzed, not knowing where to start. Ironically, procrastination often leads to more stress than simply doing the work in the first place. But lazy people have learned how to avoid the discomfort of starting, even if it means dealing with the larger burden later. Why do we procrastinate? Part of it is rooted in fear. Fear of failure, fear of making mistakes, fear of not being good enough. When you procrastinate, you're essentially trying to avoid those uncomfortable feelings. But in doing so, you avoid the very thing that can help you grow: taking action. Lazy people often trick themselves into thinking that they'll be more inspired or better equipped to complete the task at a later time. They might believe that when the mood strikes, they will do their best work. But the truth is, inspiration doesn't come when you wait for it. It comes when you act, and you build momentum through progress. Another reason people procrastinate is perfectionism. It's the idea that if something isn't going to be perfect, there's no point in doing it at all. Lazy people often get stuck in the trap of waiting for the perfect conditions to start something. They want everything to be aligned, and when it's not, they choose to do nothing. But the reality is, perfectionism is a form of avoidance. Nothing is ever perfect, and if you wait for the perfect moment to begin, you'll never get anything done. There's also the issue of self-discipline. Lazy people tend to lack the discipline needed to stick to a schedule or routine. Without the drive to push through tasks, they fall into the habit of putting things off. They may be motivated at the beginning of a project, but when the excitement fades or the task becomes tedious, they choose to delay it. Discipline, however, is the key to overcoming procrastination. The more consistent you are in pushing through the discomfort of starting, the easier it becomes to take action. Procrastination also has a way of feeding on itself. The more you procrastinate, the more you convince yourself that you're not capable of handling the task. You start to doubt your abilities and become less confident in your capacity to succeed. It's like a snowball effect. Each task you put off creates another mountain to climb, and soon you're drowning in work and the anxiety of it all. It becomes harder to start, and you feel trapped in the cycle of inaction. But the good news is that procrastination is not a permanent trait. It's a habit, and habits can be changed. The first step in overcoming procrastination is recognizing it and understanding the reasons behind it. Once you identify why you're procrastinating, you can start to take small steps to break the cycle. One method is to break large tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks. Instead of seeing the project as one big task, focus on completing one part of it at a time. This makes it less intimidating and easier to start. Another strategy is to set deadlines for yourself and stick to them. You don't need to wait for someone else to hold you accountable. By creating a sense of urgency, you force yourself to stop procrastinating. If you find it difficult to stay focused, try using tools like timers or apps that block distractions. Putting a limit on how long you can spend on certain activities helps you regain control over your time. Most importantly, be kind to yourself. Overcoming procrastination isn't about being perfect. It's about making progress. Every step you take to stop procrastinating is a step towards bettering yourself. It's about building the habit of taking action, even when you don't feel like it. And once you start, you'll find that the momentum you build will help you move past the procrastination that once held you back. They lack discipline. Discipline is the backbone of success. It is the ability to stay focused, adhere to a plan, and maintain consistency even when things get difficult. For lazy people, however, discipline is something they often lack. Without discipline, goals remain unachieved, tasks are left incomplete, and potential is wasted. Lazy individuals are constantly seeking the easiest route, avoiding the discomfort that comes with working hard, staying focused, and pushing themselves to improve. As a result, they miss out on opportunities for growth and personal development. The absence of discipline often begins with small actions, or, more accurately, inactions. A lack of discipline doesn't appear suddenly. It builds up gradually. It starts with skipping one task, then another, and eventually this becomes a pattern. Lazy people may not intentionally avoid work, but they fail to consistently follow through on their commitments. It's easy to tell yourself you'll get to something later, and once that habit begins, it's even easier to keep postponing the task. This pattern of procrastination reveals the core issue, the inability to stick to a routine or follow through on plans. Without discipline, there is no accountability, no urgency to take action, and no drive to keep going despite setbacks. One of the key reasons lazy people lack discipline is a desire for immediate gratification. In today's fast-paced world, it's all too easy to want results right away. Discipline, however, requires delaying gratification and understanding that success takes time. Lazy individuals often seek short-term pleasures or distractions, like watching television, scrolling through social media, or indulging in mindless activities, instead of focusing on the long-term benefits of hard work and commitment. These short-term distractions may seem more appealing, but they never lead to meaningful achievements. This habit of seeking instant rewards prevents them from developing the self-control needed to maintain a disciplined approach to their goal. Furthermore, the lack of discipline often comes from a lack of structure. Lazy people don't tend to organize their time effectively. They might have good intentions but no clear plan on how to achieve them. Without structure, it's easy to lose focus, waste time, and forget what needs to be done. They fail to break down big tasks into smaller, manageable steps, which makes everything seem overwhelming. When there's no clear structure, it's tempting to give in to distractions or simply avoid tasks altogether. This disorganization feeds into a cycle of laziness, where each day passes without making any real progress toward goals. Another aspect of discipline is the ability to overcome challenges. Lazy people often give up at the first sign of difficulty. They lack the mental fortitude to keep going when things get tough. Discipline, however, is built through overcoming obstacles. It's about pushing through the discomfort, sticking with a plan when the results aren't immediate, and staying focused even when you're tired or frustrated. Lazy individuals, on the other hand, avoid challenges and choose the easier path, avoiding discomfort at all costs. The result is a lack of growth and an inability to develop the resilience needed to succeed. Lazy people also tend to lack the internal motivation required to stay disciplined. Motivation can be fleeting, but discipline is what keeps you going when motivation fades. Without a clear sense of purpose or a strong internal drive, lazy individuals often fail to maintain consistency. They might start a project with excitement, but when the novelty wears off, they quickly lose interest. Discipline, however, comes from within. It's about knowing what needs to be done and doing it, regardless of how you feel. This internal drive is essential for achieving long-term success. Yet lazy individuals often fail to cultivate it. They wait for external motivation, and when that doesn't come, they give up. The consequences of lacking discipline are far-reaching. Without discipline, lazy people will always struggle to achieve their goals. They may have dreams and aspirations, but without the discipline to take consistent action, these dreams will remain out of reach. They'll find themselves constantly starting new projects or making new plans, only to abandon them halfway through. Over time, this lack of follow-through creates a sense of frustration and self-doubt. They begin to believe that they are incapable of success, because they haven't developed the discipline necessary to see things through. Developing discipline is not easy, but it is absolutely necessary for success. It requires a shift in mindset. Instead of looking for shortcuts or immediate rewards, you must embrace the process. You must learn to set clear goals, break them down into manageable steps, and commit to following through. Discipline isn't something that happens overnight. It's a muscle that needs to be trained and strengthened over time. The more you practice it, the easier it becomes to stay focused and stay on track, even when distractions arise or challenges come your way. One practical way to build discipline is to establish routine. When you have a routine, you don't have to rely on motivation or willpower to get things done. Everything becomes a habit. If you commit to doing something every day, even when you don't feel like it, that action becomes automatic. Routines create structure, and structure is essential for developing discipline. It's also helpful to hold yourself accountable. Set deadlines for yourself, track your progress, and reward yourself for staying on track. This reinforcement helps to keep you disciplined and motivated. Discipline also involves saying no to distractions and focusing on what truly matters. It's easy to get sidetracked by things that aren't important, but discipline requires the ability to prioritize and say no to things that don't align with your goal. By consistently making choices that support your long-term objectives, you strengthen your ability to stay disciplined and focused. Ultimately, discipline is the key to turning aspirations into reality. Without it, success will always feel just out of reach. But with consistent effort, structure, and self-control, anyone can build the discipline needed to accomplish their goals and reach their full potential. They fear failure. Fear of failure is one of the most paralyzing forces in a person's life, especially for lazy people. This fear is not just about failing at a task, it's the deep-seated fear of being judged, of not being good enough, or of facing consequences that seem unbearable. For lazy individuals, the thought of failure often becomes so overwhelming that it stops them from even trying. They choose inaction over the possibility of not succeeding, and in doing so, they prevent themselves from achieving anything meaningful. This fear often stems from past experiences or a lack of self-confidence. If someone has failed before, they might carry that memory with them, internalizing it as evidence that they're not capable of succeeding. The fear of repeating past mistakes can be so strong that it becomes easier to avoid trying altogether. Lazy people, rather than facing the challenge, will convince themselves that it's better to do nothing than risk failure again. This mindset is a trap because it stops them from growing and improving. It builds walls around their potential, preventing them from moving forward. In addition to past failures, there is also a fear of judgment. For lazy people, failing means being seen as weak, incompetent, or incapable by others. The thought of others judging them for their shortcomings is so uncomfortable that they often prefer to stay in their comfort zones, avoiding situations where they might be exposed. This fear can lead to a cycle of self-doubt and anxiety, where the individual is constantly worried about what others think instead of focusing on the task at hand. The need for external validation can become a powerful force, shaping decisions and actions, and leading to a reluctance to take risks. Furthermore, lazy individuals often exaggerate the consequences of failure in their mind. They imagine the worst-case scenario: public embarrassment, losing everything, or being seen as a failure, and allow these fears to dominate their thinking. What they fail to realize is that failure is not the end of the road. In fact, failure is often a necessary step on the path to success. Everyone who has achieved something significant has failed at some point, but they did not allow that failure to define them. Instead, they learned from it, adapted, and kept going. Lazy people, however, view failure as a personal reflection of their worth, which makes the thought of it so unbearable that they would rather avoid doing anything altogether. This fear of failure also results in perfectionism. Lazy individuals often believe that if they can't do something perfectly, then they shouldn't do it at all. They set unrealistically high standards for themselves and are afraid to take action unless everything is perfect. This leads to a state of inaction where they don't attempt anything unless they feel fully prepared, which rarely happens. The pursuit of perfection becomes an excuse to avoid starting in the first place. Instead of embracing the learning process and accepting that mistakes are part of it, they let the fear of not being perfect hold them back. The fear of failure is also tied to a lack of resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back after setbacks, and lazy people often lack this trait because they're so afraid of falling short. When they do face failure, they don't have the mental strength to move past it. Instead, they retreat further into their comfort zones, where there is no risk of failure. This avoidance strategy only reinforces their fear, making it harder to take risks in the future. In this way, the fear of failure becomes self-fulfilling. The more they avoid it, the more it controls them. At its core, the fear of failure prevents lazy people from taking action. They may dream about success or wish for change, but when it comes time to take the first step, they hesitate. The fear of not succeeding becomes so consuming that it stops them from moving forward at all. They might think that by avoiding the risk of failure, they are protecting themselves, but in reality, they are only ensuring that they never reach their full potential. To overcome this fear, lazy people need to reframe their thinking. Instead of seeing failure as something to avoid at all costs, they should see it as an opportunity to learn and grow. Failure is not a reflection of their worth or capability. It is simply a part of the process. By changing their perception of failure, they can begin to take more risks and embrace challenges. Taking small steps toward a goal, even when the outcome is uncertain, helps to build confidence and resilience. Each failure becomes less frightening when it is viewed as a stepping stone rather than a setback. Additionally, it's important to focus on the effort, not just the outcome. Lazy people often focus so much on the fear of failure that they forget that success is built on consistent effort, not perfection. By committing to the process and focusing on doing the best they can in the moment, they can take the pressure off themselves to be perfect. With each step, they will find that failure is not as devastating as they once believed, and the fear of it will slowly lose its power. Ultimately, overcoming the fear of failure is about building courage and shifting one's mindset. Instead of fearing failure, lazy individuals can learn to embrace it as part of their growth journey. With the right mindset, they can break free from the cycle of avoidance and start making progress toward their goals, knowing that failure is just another opportunity to learn and try again. They focus on distractions. In today's world, distractions are everywhere. With the rise of smartphones, social media, streaming services, and constant notifications, it has never been easier to get sidetracked. Lazy people, however, take this a step further by intentionally focusing on distractions rather than dedicating their time to meaningful work. They are drawn to the allure of temporary pleasure, whether it's scrolling through social media, watching TV, or engaging in mindless activities. These distractions seem harmless at first, but when they become the primary focus, they start to rob people of time and energy that could be spent on more productive pursuits. One of the main reasons lazy individuals focus on distractions is that they offer immediate gratification. Distractions, especially in the form of entertainment or social media, provide a quick, feel-good release. When a person is faced with the demands of a task The brain might seek out these distractions as a way to avoid the discomfort that comes with hard work. It's much easier to check your phone or watch a funny video than to sit down and do something that requires effort. The instant pleasure that comes from these distractions is much more tempting than the delayed reward of accomplishing something significant. Lazy people fall into the trap of choosing short-term enjoyment over long-term fulfillment. The problem with focusing on distractions is that it leads to wasted time. Every moment spent on something unimportant is a moment taken away from something more valuable.